Lecture 1. What is economics? Here we are in the middle of summer vacation, but you have to tell your friends, I can't go to the beach with you this year because I have to study for my economics class. And they say, wow, you must be really interested in that class. So what is economics anyway? How would you answer that question? Here's a couple ways you might do that. First, you could say that economics is the study of the economy. Or you could say it's the study of why prices are going up, or the study of why Amazon just laid off a couple thousand people. Any of those answers could be correct, and we'll go back to those kind of issues as we go through the course. But in answering those types of questions, using those kinds of definitions of economics, you actually are using those are complicated answers with a lot of different moving parts. So economists like to take a little bit different approach in defining what is economics. We like to break things down into simpler parts and then build those parts into economic models that allow us to answer those kinds of complicated questions. So let's take a look at how the definition of economics is built using some of these simple parts. Here's how an economist would define economics. Economics is the study of how we allocate scarce resources to meet infinite wants. This definition is built on simplifying assumptions. Those are those parts that I was talking about people and how they make decisions. And economists use reasonable assumptions about people and firms to build models that can allow us to answer those more complex questions like the ones I described earlier. Notice that an assumption is something that you take for granted is true. You don't have to prove it's true. It's something that you just assume is true, hence it's an assumption. And an economic model is a simplified description of reality built up from a number of reasonable assumptions about people and how they operate. Okay, so let's put that together with our definition of economics. We said we defined economics as the study of how to meet infinite wants with limited resources. So let's break that down into the assumptions that we use to build that definition. The first assumption is that people have infinite wants. That is, people always want more. Consumers want to consume more to get greater satisfaction or enjoyment, what economists call utility. Now, when we say that there are infinite wants, that is, we always want to be consuming more, that means that even if we have enough of one individual good or thing or service that we use, we want more of all goods and services. Or maybe we want to have a nicer version of the good or service, like better food or a nicer apartment. Or we may want to consume something new, like new experiences by traveling to new places. All of these are examples that demonstrate how people always want more. Even if you've got enough of one thing, you always want more of everything. We also assume that firms, in a sense, have infinite wants. Firms always want to make higher profits. So their owners, stockholders in the company, or the proprietors who own the company, can consume more goods and services. So we can also view firms as always wanting more, as having infinite wants. Now, assuming that people have infinite wants is a very strong assumption about human psychology, and it doesn't capture everything about how people behave. But it describes the aspect of human behavior that is most relevant for answering economic questions. That's why we believe this is a reasonable assumption for an economic model. Okay, so let's go back to our definition now. So we discussed the assumption of infinite wants. Now let's discuss the assumption of limited resources. The second very reasonable assumption is that resources are limited. Each of us has only a limited amount of money to spend, and every country has only so many natural resources. So there's a limit to how much food a country can grow, or the size of oil reserves that it has, or how many workers it has. Meeting infinite wants with limited resources means that people and governments can sometimes borrow in the short run to consume more now. But remember that you can only borrow so much, and ultimately you have to pay those loans off. So, as we all know, using the credit card is only a temporary solution. There aren't enough resources to meet all those infinite wants, to give us all the stuff that we'd like to have. We have to figure out a way to allocate our resources. And here economists employ a third assumption, that people are rational. Now, rationality means something very different to an economist than you might use that word in everyday language. As economists, we assume that people are rational, that is, that they are constantly calculating how to maximize their total utility level, that is, their level of satisfaction. A rational person tries to maximize their utility by figuring out, and the way they do it is by figuring out the best way to allocate their limited resources across all the infinite things that they could buy or consume. Now, there's some concepts called bounded rationality that say that evaluating the best way to allocate your income across millions of choices is a difficult job. So some economists prefer to think of people using fast and frugal rules to help them make choices, like always buying the largest package at the grocery store. This is called bounded rationality because there are some boundaries or limits on the calculations that people make. In behavioral economics, other economists note that there are some situations where people don't behave rationally. That is, their behavior does not maximize their utility. Here's a common example. You buy a pair of expensive shoes, but find out that they hurt your feet. You continue to wear them though, because you don't want to waste your money. But notice that once you bought the shoes and can't return them, your level of satisfaction would actually be higher if you didn't wear the shoes. In fact, you wore the other shoes that don't hurt. In this situation, a person is not being rational, but people do this all the time. Behavioral economists believe that people make decisions that are irrational, but in a predictable way. So behavioral economics is sometimes called the study of predictably irrational behavior. The problem with in behavioral economics, though, is that it's been easy to find behavior that's irrational, but the predictable part is pretty hard. Nonetheless, people working in marketing, finance, and public policy are trying to apply the insights of behavioral economics. Go and Google on the word nudging, a term that is used where in situations where policy analysis tries to get people to engage in behavior that's good for them, and you'll see an example of behavioral economics. But in this course, we'll stick to traditional rationality because it's better understood and it does a good job in most cases. Our final aspect of rationality is that people engage in cost-benefit analysis. They compute the costs and benefits of any activity. If the benefits are greater than the costs, then they do that activity. If the costs are greater than the benefits, they don't. So to review, we've developed a definition of economics, a study of how to meet infinite wants with limited resources. We've used assumptions to build that definition. And we assume that people are economically rational.